So I'm going to give you 3 top tips for creating realism with coloured pencils. I mean, there's loads of tips. I can give you hundreds of tips, but I'm going to stick with 3 that I think are incredibly useful and go an awful long way to creating realism. So the first one is, and this might sound a little bit crazy, but don't go crazy, don't go wild with your details. Now you might be looking at this and going, well, Bonnie, you know, what rubbish are you talking, because this is full of details. And yeah, you know, it's a detailed, realistic portrait. However, you will see on this particular portrait that there are areas of just colour, just value, just dark or just light, and not, you can't see every single tiny little piece of hair. And for me, to create something that looks really realistic, it means that it looks like you were looking at an actual animal. And when you look at your dog or your cat or your horse or your, you know, rabbit or whatever, you don't see every single bit of fur, every single hair. What you see are lights and darks. You see all of the shadows, you see the highlights, you see areas that don't have any detail at all, you see areas that have got an awful lot of details. And that for me is one of the biggest tips that I can give anybody who's striving for realism. If we look at this piece here, yes, there's lots of details in here. When we come to here, there's no detail in here. There's hardly any detail in this little bit here. There's a little bit of detail up on the top of the head here, but it's quite nice and soft. We've got areas where there's quite a lot of detail. So we've got some quite nice, strong hairlines in here, which then fade into much softer hairlines. When we come to the edge here, the hairs, you don't see all of those individual hairs. They're all really nice and soft. When you come into this highlighty area here, we can see not every single hair, but we can see sort of strands of hair, we can see blocks of hair, we can see little sort of nuances of value changes in there. And when you get to these really dark areas, we can't really see very much detail at all. And yet where you've got a highlight that comes into your dark area, we have a little bit more detail. For me, this is a really important factor for creating realism with coloured pencils. It's all about getting your details in there, but not over egging them. Make sure you rely on your values, so your lights and your darks. They are the things that are going to make your drawings look so realistic. They are the things that are going to enable you to show the structure of the animal's face, you know, the structure of the skeleton underneath the hair and the skin and everything. The details are not what is going to make your piece look realistic. You know, everybody has a different style. Some people like to put all of the details and everything in. For me, it's about a little bit softer with the details. It's more about really pushing those lights and the darks. So that is my #1 tip in this particular session for creating realism with colour pencil. So my next tip is use black. This is a tip that I've given out quite a lot. A lot of people believe that you can't use black, and that would be the case for things like watercolour painting. You wouldn't normally use black in watercolour. You'd make your blacks up. And what I'm not saying is use black on its own, although I actually do quite regularly. But black is a really useful colour when it comes to creating realism with coloured pencils. One of my favourite blacks is the polychromos black. And the reason being is not because it's really black, it's because it's a little bit more translucent than other colours. And if we have a look at this this chap here, what I find with the polychromos black is that I can use it over the top of other colours to darken them. So I can create blacks if I want to create black, or I can use my black very gently over the top of other colours to darken them up. So if we look at the lovely shadow up here, you know, get your forelock in, get your oranges and your reds and your pinks and everything in here. And then very gently, I would probably use a red first. I'd probably use a Caput Mortem Violet first in this area, just so that when I did use the black, it's not going to interact with anything that's orange, and then it might go a little bit green. So I put a little bit of red in there first, a little bit of Caput Mortem Violet, and then I'd go over with my black and I would just gently darken, 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 darken. So you've got a beautiful shadow that has still got, you know, a myriad of colours in there, but it's dark enough, and that's what's really, really important. I've used black a huge amount in this portrait, you know, bringing all of these lovely, lovely shadows in here. Down here, I've used black down here. Used black all in this beautiful shadow down here along the shoulder. It's a really key colour for me. It exists, it's there, it's in all of the different coloured pencil manufacturers' boxes. There is nothing wrong with using black, and I use it in all of my pieces, and all of my pieces I feel look realistic, they look lovely and vibrant, and the black is there to really help you get those values in. So, you know, if you don't want to use black, that's absolutely fine. You can mix your colours and everything like that up. For me, it's about ease of use. Coloured pencil is a slow medium. I'm going to use my blacks anywhere where I've got some really, really dark shadows. And I feel it works just brilliantly. Okay, so my third tip for creating realistic animals with coloured pencils is don't outline your subject. We all have very different styles when it comes to drawing, and for me, another really, really important tip is don't feel you have to add an outline where the colour of your subject is very similar to the background of your paper. For me, the subject and the paper there needs to be a connection. It needs to look like it is part of that background. My portraits, I don't want to look as if they've been cut out and stuck onto a background. So wherever I can, I'm going to have these beautiful lost edges. So where the subject sort of almost disappears off into the background of the surface you're drawing on. A lot of the time when I'm drawing white animals on white paper, you'll see the lost edges, and they work beautifully. You can see down the ear here, we've got light coming down here. It's not dark all the way to the edge. There are areas where you do want it to be dark all the way to the edge, like on the collar here. This you know, this works really nicely and kind of stands out. When we've got coming down the jowls here, we've got a definite dark here. But the top of the nose area here, this, again, another lost edge, it just drifts out gently into the paper and you have that beautiful connection between the two. I do not want to see, on my work, I don't want to have like an outline or a block around it. I really need to feel that connection between the subject and the surface I'm drawing on. And for me, it's about creating that lovely, gentle, I guess, subtlety on some of those edges. Not every single edge, otherwise everything would just drift off. But a dog like this, where you've got the lights, you've got the darks, you've got some really, really dark elements in here, and you've got some really beautiful light elements. You know, what's lovely about this is that interaction with the surface and how it sits there and it is all part and parcel of there. It doesn't look like it's been cut out with scissors and plonked onto something and you've got an edge around it. So that for me is another really, really big tip when it comes to drawing with anything really, with realism. When you look at an animal doesn't have an outline around it, it doesn't have a dark line around it. The darkness doesn't always come right to the edges. There are differences of light throughout the whole piece. You know, and throughout the whole dog. When you look at a dog, there might be light around its, you know, part of its face, and it might have a much stronger shadow on the other side. And for me, it's really important to bring that in, and to have that the surface be a huge part of the drawing. It's not just something I'm drawing on. You know, it's part and parcel of the whole thing, and it's one of the reasons why I give my portraits an awful lot of space. You know, if somebody asks for a 10 by 12 portrait, I'll probably do it a little bit bigger But if I was to do a 10 by 12, my portrait would sit really nicely within that, and there would be plenty of white space in there to let the subject breathe. That's your fourth tip. But yeah, you know, it's really, really important for me to have that lovely, the lost edges, how the edges just nicely, softly connect with that background. So we've got little less detail than what you would normally put in. So, you know, a mixture of high detail and much softer work. We have using black. Black is so useful. And we have our lost edges. So 3 really, really great tips, I feel, for creating realistic animals with coloured pencils.